Hello and welcome to the Clear Crypto podcast, brought to you by Stockware and Cointelegraph. No jargon, no hype, just straight talk on what crypto and blockchain do today and what they'll do tomorrow. Now, if the words clear and crypto sound like a contradiction in terms to you, you're in the right place. Maybe you're just stepping into the world. We will get you up to speed. It's what we do in every episode. And likewise, if you're an OG who lives and breathes this stuff, don't go anywhere, because this is for you too. It's all about how to communicate on blockchain. I'm Nathan, a journalist who's fallen into blockchain and head of media at Stockware, and I'm joined by Gareth Jenkinson, head of multimedia at Cointelegraph. Gareth, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, Nathan. I've sat out of a couple of episodes, so it's great to be back in the hot seat with you and chatting all things blockchain once again.
Yeah, absolutely. And you actually went to a really interesting event in Vegas. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was at Bitcoin 2025 in Las Vegas. I had a really fantastic time. I spoke to a lot of very influential Bitcoiners doing really great things in the space. But I really walked away with it feeling really optimistic and upbeat about the future of the industry. And I really had a great time.
What was the vibe like there, Gareth?
Super busy. They had it at a very big convention center in Las Vegas. And it was jam-packed. I mean, the day that Ross Ulbricht and Michael Saylor were on stage couldn't have been any more busy. But yeah, most people really, really excited. A very big, eclectic mix of people, influencers, heads of business, politicians, you name it, they were walking around. It was kind of surreal. It was quite crazy for me to see how far this industry's come.
Yeah, now, I mean, it's funny with crypto conferences. I was actually speaking to Stockware CEO Eli Ben-Sasson about this recently, because the pivotal moment for him in getting involved in crypto and coming into this world was a Bitcoin conference years ago. And he just described to me how different it was walking into anything he'd been to before. You know, at this point, Eli was an academic. Conferences were very serious places, quite dry. And he walked into a Bitcoin conference with all this vibe, with all this exuberance. Is that still the case at Bitcoin conferences? Are they very unlike any other conference that you would go to?
Yeah, I mean, they've evolved. I've been to a lot of the Bitcoin conferences over the past 3 years, and they've definitely evolved and gotten bigger and grander. You still have like hardcore Bitcoin maxis, you know, some people actually covering up their whole face so they can sort of remain anonymous while they're attending the events. Some people just, you know, wearing like a plain suit with an orange tie, you know, to really represent the Bitcoin orange. There's a lot of people that are excited about the industry. Some people just in normal plain clothes, but a lot of people are really expressing themselves. It was a lot of fun, really. I really enjoyed myself.
Just catch us up on what you said about people who literally had their faces covered and didn't want people to see their faces, because some of our listeners might be quite new to the whole kind of, you know, Bitcoin anonymity kind of vibe. Just join the dots there for us. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I think for some people, they really live out the values of sort of being able to transact anonymously and sort of with some element of privacy. And when you go to these events and people see who you are and see your face, there is some element of risk, especially if you're holding some cryptocurrency. So they'd rather cover up their face, not be identifiable at all, so that, you know, there's no risk of them being held up at gunpoint or something like that. And to be honest, it's a pretty good segue for this episode, I think, Nathan.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to joke to you, Gareth. You and I actually had a chat at the event. It's just I had my face covered, so you couldn't see me. All right, yeah, let's move on to today's topic, because we're going to talk crime. Everyone loves to talk crime. And the sad reality, I guess, is that if you follow crypto even a little bit, you probably hear a lot about crime. Some people would say to an unrepresentative degree about crime. And we're really going to be not holding back at all, really trying to get to the bottom of crypto crime. We're joined today by Jenny Levine, one of the sharpest minds in the space when it comes to the legal side of crypto. Jenny is the Chief Legal and Operations Officer at the Algorand Foundation. Before that, she was Federal Prosecutor, in-house at DraftKings, and Chief Regulatory Officer at Figment. She sat across the table from the SEC and the DOJ and worked inside the systems too. Hello, Jenny.
Hi, Nathan. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we actually had a mini dose of you in a past episode, which was our special Mother's Day episode, and we enjoyed speaking to you so much then that we decided to have you back and have you get to the bottom of crypto crime with us. Gareth, huge topic, crypto crime. How much of your time do you spend on Cointelegraph reporting about this?
In years past when I was doing a lot more writing, I think I must have written about crypto crime once a month and in depth about once or twice a year when, the really big crypto crime reports came out from the likes of Chainalysis. So I've done my fair share of coverage about crypto crime, and it's unfortunately part and parcel of this industry over the past 5 to 10 years.
Jenny, when you speak to people and they hear what you do, if they've heard of one or two crypto scandals, which ones are they usually? What are the most famous?
Certainly FTX. I think, you have to be living under a rock if you haven't heard of FTX.
But for those listeners who are living under that rock, tell us what we're talking about. I love it. We're the podcast that accuses our listeners of living under a rock. That's wonderful.
And let me say this. Perhaps you don't know it as FTX, but you have heard of this fraudulent scheme, involving Sam Bankman-Fried, or you have heard of this massive crypto fraud that involved an exchange and an American citizen. I think a lot of people have heard of this because of the breadth of the fraud that happened and just the number of people that were affected by it.
This was not an operation just within the world of crypto that kind of blockchain geeks know about, but this was an exchange where it was very easy to swap your dollars or yen for crypto, and where lots of regular people who didn't know much about crypto were actually holding money. This whole thing collapsed and many normal people lost their money, and that's what made it massively high profile. So dig into the details a little bit for us, Jenny, and can you give us kind of a 2-minute overview of what exactly happened?
Sure. So the main allegations were, and those were proven to be true through a trial, were that Sam Bankman-Fried, he is the founder of the FTX crypto exchange, stole customer deposits to support the operations of the exchange of FTX and Alameda. So again, as you mentioned, this is not a scheme that's unique to crypto. Using customer or investor funds for unlawful purpose is a crime that occurs in many different industries. So in terms of the specific allegations here, we saw an indictment that had 13 counts in it. Counts 1 and counts 2 were wire fraud and conspiracy. And this was for misusing customer funds to pay the expenses and the debts of Sam Bankman-Fried's crypto hedge fund, which I mentioned is Alameda Research. Counts 3 and 4 were simple fraud and conspiracy in connection with the purchase and the sale of derivatives. So similar to counts 1 and counts 2, but again, we were dealing with derivatives there, which should be a term that's familiar to those who are involved in the traditional financial industry. Counts 5 and 6 were securities fraud and conspiracy, and this was for misuse of customer funds for Alameda Research and lying to investors about Alameda's financial condition. Counts 7 and 8, again, we're back to wire fraud and conspiracy. This is a tool that federal prosecutors use to charge a vast array of crimes. And count 7 and 8 focused on lenders to Alameda Research by providing false information about Alameda's financial condition to the lenders. Count 9 was bank fraud, making false statements to banks to open bank accounts. Counts 10 and 11, unlicensed money transmission and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Count 12, illegal political contributions. And count 13 was conspiracy to violate the FCPA anti-bribery provisions. And the allegation there was that Sam Bankman-Fried tried to bribe foreign officials in China to induce them to unfreeze certain accounts. That was a lot of information. And it sounds, overwhelming and intimidating. And it is both of those things. But if we break it down, again, the point here and the real point I want people to understand is that all of these charges are brought in traditional finance and in other areas all the time by federal prosecutors. The main statute that is charged when it comes to financial crimes or other crimes is wire fraud, right? And conspiracy to commit wire fraud. And we see money laundering in all different types of activity, everything from narcotics trafficking to financial crime. Again, it's a very broad statute that is used by the DOJ. So this conduct was egregious and its breadth was astonishing. And I think the liquidity and the wealth we see in the crypto industry allowed it to become as massive as it was, but it is not unique to the crypto environment and the crypto world.
Fascinating. Now let's move to Gareth. Gareth, you see how media relates to all of this. Was it reported at the time as this is what crypto and blockchain do? Or was it reported as this is a criminal program which leveraged crypto and blockchain to do what it wanted? There's a nuance there, but I think it's an important nuance.
I think it's fair to say that most publications did their best to report it pretty factually. And like Jenny laid it out, charge by charge, we're pretty specific. But it's true. When we look at it in hindsight, most sort of conventional media houses used it as an opportunity to bull the rest of the cryptocurrency industry as, full of fraud and full of crime and full of people that are willing to just take advantage of other people. I think for me, the biggest takeaway here is FTX was an example of someone doing very questionable things that happens in TradFi all the time. But the very unfortunate takeaway from that is that the cryptocurrency industry as a whole got a very, very bad rap for at least 2 years. And, we endured a 2-year sort of bear market after that, after FTX collapsed, because it was such a big black swan event. And a few other big failings happened after that as well. So we're still kind of picking up the pieces. Everyone knows Sam Bankman-Fried was a bad actor, but at the end of the day, you can't undo what was done. And a lot of people's opinions were shaped by what happened.
Okay, so I'm going to unpack what we've just said a little bit, because we've been talking about FTX, which was a centralized exchange. And what we mean there is that it's a company that offered to sell people crypto and then look after their crypto and basically had the crypto in their own hands. That's what we call the custodial route to holding crypto. Crypto purists don't tend to like that route. They tend to like another route, which is called self-custody. And this is basically holding their own crypto so that nobody can access their crypto on their behalf. It's the digital equivalent of having a piece of gold in a safe that only you can access. And this is where I think we get to the really interesting part of the conversation, which is that FTX was one such centralized exchange, essentially a bank or a financial institution that will look after your crypto. What we're saying here is that, okay, for us people knowledgeable about crypto, we see that as a case of human actors doing bad things, and instead of choosing to go to a street and hold people up at gunpoint, doing it from a fancy house where they're messing around with the digital roots of people's money, but essentially criminality in the guise of crypto. Whereas for much of the rest of the world, what they saw was crypto, crime. This is crime, this is crypto, centralized crypto exchanges. There's nothing inherent that makes them more vulnerable to crime than a general bank or something, apart from the fact that there's a lack of regulation. And that's because the regulators haven't got their heads around this. Gareth, you report on this. Do you see the kind of world of regulators as that they're learning still? They're still getting their heads around crypto. Is that right?
Yeah, they definitely are. And I think we've seen a lot of evolution and a lot of different takes on it. I mean, different parts of the world treat it very, very differently. I think if you look at the US now, there's a change of guard at the SEC, and there will be a very different approach to regulating companies and protocols in the United States. And I'll watch that with great interest, because I do think there will always be some sort of element of bias and capture when it comes to different individuals being at the head of these institutions. But I think at the very core level, most people need to understand something fundamentally before they're regulated well. We were just having a conversation on Cointelegraph's Daily X show about, regulations in Europe, looking at different protocols and how they manage data. The nuance of that regulation was basically like, if you're breaking the rules in terms of holding data, you might have to delete the blockchain. And it doesn't quite work like that, especially if it's a decentralized permissionless blockchain. But that's a very high level example of the regulators maybe not understanding how the technology works when they're trying to put together good regulations to protect people. But, over time, these things evolve. But, when it comes to companies and wrongdoings, I think the rules are pretty simple if you look at an example of FTX. And all the misconduct that was done was very much human misconduct. It becomes a lot more difficult and a lot more of a nuanced conversation when you're dealing with the specifics of a protocol, which I think we'll probably jump into now in the next part of our conversation.
Jenny, we've spoken now about crime that relates to centralized exchanges. Talk to us about what's perhaps an even more complex topic, which is when people actually exploit the code or the hardwired nature of the blockchain for crime then. Talk to us about some of this stuff and define some of the terms for us.
Sure. So I'm going to give you some examples here. There was an indictment that came from the DOJ. There were two brothers, and they were the Bueno brothers. And that indictment alleged that the defendants there were trying to reorder transactions, blocks of transactions on Ethereum to their advantage. And through this, they were able to steal approximately $25 million in crypto.
So, Jenny, just to be clear, what you're talking about is this basically a queue, a line, an order that things are done according to the protocols. And if you can mess around with that order, if you can change that order, then you can have advantages. Just like if you're able to go into a time machine and check the lottery results, then you're able to kind of screw that system. It's the same kind of idea, right?
In a very general sense, Nathan, yes. There are a lot of details and specifics that go into it, but the bottom line is if you mess with the underlying system and the ordering of blocks, then yes, you can use that to your advantage. And that takes knowing the protocol code, knowing the different players that go into running the protocol, and being able to have a really deep understanding. While it's technical, the act of what they were doing here is really front running. Right? Front-running securities trades happens all the time in traditional finance. But again, this is just a way of doing it using the crypto industry. It's native to the crypto industry. But the theme of the fraud happening, that happens elsewhere as well. There are just ways to do it now within the technical aspects of the crypto community.
But the classic, what we might call a hack or exploit, is finding some weak point in the code that can be exploited in some way. Is that a fair summation?
I think that is a fair articulation of what an exploit or a hack is. And let me give you one more example here. So again, there was a DeFi exchange hack, and there an indictment was filed because a senior software engineer at a technology company exploited a vulnerability in the Solana blockchain by reverse engineering the smart contracts to generate millions of dollars through fraudulently inflated fees on a decentralized crypto exchange. Now, those are lots of fancy words that I just used there. But the bottom line is, again, we see an exploit or a hack. We have an individual who understands blockchain, is probably very well versed in engineering and coding, and is able to enter the blockchain crypto world and manipulate the code at its purest form so that money flows in different ways than it's supposed to, sent to areas or people that are not supposed to go to. And that is the essence of a hack when it comes to cryptocurrency. It's messing with the software of the protocol or the code that is being used to support the blockchain.
Now, listeners, if you're learning new stuff here, you're about to learn something that's really fascinating. Gareth, introduce us to the weird and wonderful world of white hat hackers. This kind of bizarre dynamic that you have within the world of crypto where a load of money goes missing. Everyone says it's crime. And then someone says, oh, it was a white hat hacker. What's this all about?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an entirely new concept. And a lot of companies, especially software companies out there, will put out bug bounties and similar sort of incentive mechanisms to get really smart coders to look over their code, find exploits, and then disclose them so that they can fix the code and remove this vulnerability from the code. Now, in the cryptocurrency space, you have white hat hackers that are essentially sort of coding enthusiasts that will look over various smart contract code and all sorts of different protocols and figure out ways in which they can manipulate or hack or extract value from these protocols. But instead of just taking all the value from themselves, they disclose it to the protocols. And often they either demand some sort of a payment or they just do it free of charge and they say, hey, listen, by the way, I found this vulnerability. You guys should probably fix that. I think in a lot of instances, some protocols and foundations are quite good about paying these people for disclosing these vulnerabilities. There have been times in the past where other people have held protocols to ransom, but the idea is a white hat hacker, someone that finds a vulnerability and discloses it before an illicit actor takes advantage of it and steals a load of money from the protocol.
Jenny, is there always a firm line between malicious criminal actors and white hat hackers?
A crime is a crime is a crime. So even if you have a good intention and you're a white hat hacker, if you exploit a vulnerability and you steal funds, you can be charged with a crime. Now, if you give the funds back, that will go into the DOJ's determination of whether they prosecute you. But yes, you still can be charged. Claiming good intent does not negate the crime or the elements of the crime from a strictly legal standpoint.
So what governs the fact that this is often accepted in the crypto community? Is that just kind of convention, unwritten rule, the failure of people to prosecute? How is this dynamic working? It's a fascinating dynamic.
I can't speak to why it is accepted or if it is accepted with a smile on the face of the person who it happened to or the protocol team that it happened to. I will say that, in terms of triaging, perhaps the DOJ or other investigators, regulators, prosecutors do not put these types of white hat hacks first on their list of crimes to prosecute. Perhaps also because the loss is, once you've given the funds back, it doesn't meet the federal threshold, at least in the United States. And so it wouldn't be essentially a priority for them. But that's the best answer I can give you.
Okay, now I must tell you, Jenny, when you last came on the show, I thought to myself, if only we could get Jenny for a whole show, then we'll really, really understand crypto crime. And now you've come on for a whole show and we're almost at the end. And I'm feeling again that we're just scratching the surface. So I really don't know what to do about this. But we do need to wrap up shortly, and we have so many open questions. I'm going to end in a few moments with a question that I think will at least take us to that point of having a little bit more insight. But first of all, a little bit of housekeeping. If you can't wait until the next episode of this show to hear Gareth, you can actually hear him every day. Gareth, where can they do that?
Yeah. We host a daily X show called Chain Reaction on Cointelegraph's X account on Twitter. If you want to come and hear the latest news, high-profile guests, and us unpacking the biggest topics daily, weekly, come and join us Monday to Friday, 3 o'clock Central European Time, 9 a.m. Eastern Time if you're in the United States. I promise you won't regret it.
And Jenny, if people want to find out more about you, see what you're doing, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter @_Jennie Levin, all one word, or you can find me at Algorand Foundation's Twitter, which is @Algo, ALGO Foundation.
To close up, I think it would be really nice to have the perspective from all three of us on what crypto crime is going to look like, or more specifically, whether we're all going to be able to use blockchain with more confidence in future. Gareth, what do you think?
I think it's going to change over time. I do think that there will be some element of AI tools compromising certain protocols and finding loopholes and errors in code as we go along. I still think that social engineering is going to play the biggest role in hacks and scams going forward. We still have a big problem with this at our own publication. We see it throughout the industry. You look at something like the Bybit hack that happened earlier this year. That was purely from, social engineering and sort of an inside job to gain access to some hot wallets, online wallets that were holding a lot of Ethereum. So I think that that's generally going to be the main way in which hackers, steal funds from people. But it's going to change over time. I think it's going to get less. And I do think that the industry is going to have less and less of a bad rap crime-wise. But yeah, from Starkware's side, I'm curious to hear what you think about this, Nathan, because you guys run a very good piece of infrastructure, and you probably have a front row seat to seeing how people approach trying to get the better of your systems and the wider ecosystem.
What's always been interesting to me is to see how you can build this cryptographic system, which is what we do, which essentially we're building tech which, if Sam Bankman-Fried had built his exchange around this, he actually wouldn't have had access to the money. We're not going to talk about it at length in this episode, but it's technology that means someone could build an exchange but not actually being able to ever take your money. And that's what I think is beautiful about the kind of thing that we're building. It's not just about business, it's about building something beautiful. But Jenny, you should have the last word on this. You're the absolute expert here. You tell us, are things going to get calmer? Are we all going to feel more confident? Is crime always going to be there to a point? Or is it just going to be like in any area you have crime, and in crypto you'll have crime as well, but it won't be tainted by it?
I think we are going to see less opportunities for crime, both because we're going to have clearer regulation and because, Nathan, we're going to have companies like Starkware that are building technology that will make it impossible for crime to occur because it removes the access to the funds. So both of those are very positive, and we will see, as we move forward, both of those things helping to quell the crime. I do think we will always have crime. And to Gareth's point, one of the major ways we see that are through these phishing schemes, social engineering schemes. And that is why people need to be vigilant in every aspect of their life. And especially when they are engaging in something new, like crypto, because they're not familiar with what actually is appropriate to ask. Should people be asking for my private key? What is my private key? And so it's very important for people, when you enter anything new, to really understand what you are entering, the aspects of it. And when in doubt, don't give out your information. And that's the first layer of protection, is knowledge.
Absolutely. I think there is a hint of optimism there that we can bring crypto and blockchain to a point where more people can feel more confident and it can serve people, which is really what the whole area and this show is about, not making a single company or a single set of people rich. That's not the crypto, that's not the blockchain vision. The vision is having a technology type that can really serve humanity and make things better and fairer. And that's what we're going to carry on exploring in future episodes of this show. The last thing we need to do is to thank our friends at Tonal Media for producing the show. Now, everyone, remember to tune in next time for the Clear Crypto podcast.